want to welcome everyone to our Eat Well Cooking Club for our October series, Cancer, They All Matter. This is our session number 2, October the 21st. And I'm Dale Kane. I'll be your moderator for today. This collaborative for October is brought to you by 2 community organizations, Advocates for Community Wellness and Stonebridge Healthy Community Initiative. We're both 501c3. We both have a healthy community initiative that wants to provide wraparound services, particularly educational services, to the community around healthy eating, managing chronic conditions for not only for the individuals, for families, and for the community. Our common mission is to improving eating habits for healthier lifestyle, increase longevity, and to have a better quality of life. We have 3 goals: to increase consumption of vegetables, fruits, and whole grains; 2, to encourage a more nutrient-rich diet plan for better health; and to reduce risk factors of chronic diseases and illnesses. And the 3rd is to attain a healthier weight through consumptions of plant-based nutrition. Our disclaimer, waiver, and concept is that this form is strictly for educational and informational purposes only. The instructors, we will or have advised you of our credentials and our training to teach this class in culinary and as well as nutrition. But we also, recipes that we provide you, we suggest that you can modify these recipes as needed for your own personal health. And recording, all our Zoom sessions are recorded. When you come on, your camera is turned off and also audio, but you have the autonomy to turn your video on and off at your discretion. I'm Dale Kane. I'm founder of Advocates for Community Wellness. I'm also the director. I'm a professional nutrition specialist. I had a certification in plant-based nutrition as a cooking coach. I also had additional training in plant-based nutrition program with the nutrition studies at Cornell under the T. Colin Campbell. Also, I have over 18 years of work experience in health promotion and disease prevention sector, coordinating wellness and culinary programs throughout the city, and a former Illinois State program and cooking coordinator, which is a national nutrition education and cooking program for families and children. Today in our agenda is myself, Del Kane. I'm going to be providing you lifestyle nutrition, foods that fight for you. And Chef M, she's going to provide the culinary experience, cancer fighting meals. And then we have with us as a guest speaker, Dr. Nika Lee. She's a gynecology oncologist, and she's going to share some information about the facts and stats and disparities of cancer. Okay, I'm going to do a replay of our biblical reference because Advocates for Community Wellness is a faith-based health promotion ministry without walls. And I always like to kick off with our biblical reference, and it comes from Genesis 1:9, which we discussed last week. Then God said, I give you every seed bearing plant on the face of the whole earth, and every tree that has fruit with seed in it. They will be yours for food. Now, last time we talked about, do we get the plant that God was talking about? Does it come from a plant, a seed bearing vegetation, or does it come from a plant, a food tech manufacturer? Okay, and so we get to choose. We get to choose our food coming from manufacturer, which comes in a box, a bag, a can, a jar, okay, or are we getting the whole food, okay, from a farmer's market or from a farm or from a market, from our local grocery store? So food that fights for you, that's our theme, and meals that heals. I'm going to reiterate from the father of medicine, which he states, let food be thy medicine. And there's another part to it, thy medicine be our food. Okay, we have our topic and learning objective this week is we're going to focus on fiber. Last week, and I'm going to incorporate some of that we talked about cruciferous vegetables, that they had anti-cancer compounds. They refer to as agents. You can refer them to antioxidants that actually help to protect you against cancer and therefore reducing our risk of cancer. But today's topic about fiber, which you will find in those cruciferous vegetables, our learning objective is going to be, can dietary fiber fight cancer? What fiber does in the body? And how much fiber do I need daily? Okay. Despite a wealth of scientific data, most people remain unaware of how they can reduce their risks of developing cancer. According to a study released, only 5 to 10% of cancer cases are linked to genetics. The remaining 90 to 95 stem from environmental and lifestyle factors and are potentially preventable. And it's always a range because it depends on the type of cancer. Now let's take a look at lung cancer, which is one of the leading cancer. It's about 25 to 30% of cancer cases are due to tobacco use, and about 1 in 3 cases are due to food choices. According to the Center of Disease Control and Prevention and the National Cancer Institute, compare cancer rates and deaths linked to risk factors such as red and processed meat intake, overweight, and low intake of fruits, vegetables, and dietary fiber. The findings, 42% of cancer cases and 45% of cancer deaths were linked to avoidable risk factors. These are factors within our control, like diet and exercise. They are largely accountable for cancer, the outcomes of the cancer. It has been observed that a high fiber diet reduces the occurrence of diseases in the digestive tract. And where diets are high in fiber, plant-based diets, there were fewer cases of colon cancer. Animal products like meat, eggs, and dairy do not contain fiber, but American diets are. We do, meaning that we do eat the animal meat, we do eat eggs, and we do eat dairy. Okay, so what is fiber? Fiber are carbohydrates, and it's found in all whole plant-based foods. Okay, and this is an example of a whole grain, which has the bran, which is fiber filled on the outer layer, and the endosperm, which is the starchy carbohydrates in the middle. It has some proteins and vitamins, and then there's the germ, which is a nutrient-packed core with additional vitamins like vitamin B, vitamin E, phytochemicals, and healthy fats. And when we refine that whole grain, we're virtually getting the endosperm, which is the starchy carbohydrate. So there's 2 kinds of fiber: insoluble fiber, which acts like a brush in our digestive tract, and the soluble fiber, which acts like a sponge. Insoluble meaning that it does not break down in water, and the soluble means that it does break down in water. Most fruits and vegetables will contain both, but the benefits of an insoluble is that it erases and prevents constipation and good for colon health. And there's some other benefits about total fiber, which I'm going to share later. Some benefits of the soluble fiber is that it helps lower the cholesterol, it stays fuller, you stay fuller longer, and it improves your blood sugar. So when the soluble fiber dissolves and it works its way through the walls of the digestive tract into our bloodstream, That's where the sponge, the reaction of the sponge, where it actually soaks up excess cholesterol. It'll attract excess fat that's in the diet, and then that is taken out of the body. Okay, all foods are not equal. This is a little example of just 2.7 grams of fiber. And when you look at it, how many graham crackers, and these are the total squares, the rectangle squares that you get, you need 14 just to get 2.7 grams of fiber. With white bread is 3.5. With cooked rice is 4.25 cups. With whole wheat bread is 1.25 slice of bread. How much fiber do you need? The average dietary fiber is 10 to 20 grams per day. That's the average intake, but experts recommend at least 30 to 40 grams per day. For women, 25 to 30 grams. For men, 35 to 40 grams. And I side on the higher end. The lower end is just the minimum that you should get in for good health. The best source of fiber, minimally processed whole grains, beans, peas, lentils, vegetables, and fruits. We want to select foods that are closer to their natural state, unrefined, unpeeled, are the highest in fiber. And look for at least 3 grams or more. For example, a woman, 3 grams per servings of food will yield about 10% of your daily intake, a slice of 100% whole wheat bread. Okay, let's take a look in the day of fiber. And how do we get to that 30? On my right side, I have selected foods that have fiber in. They're all plant-based. So let's add them up. If I have half a cup of oats, and that's probably still oats that has 8.2 grams, then I add 2 fruits, I add 3 vegetables, and 1 lentil during the course, I believe that is half a cup of lentils in the course of a day. It gets me to 32 grams. And so that's really saying that every food, every meal, that you're having some type of fiber being included in your daily intake. And how do I get to 40? By adding 2 more whole wheat grains and possibly adding 1 vegetable. Okay, high fiber diet can fight cancer. So again, how much do we need? We mentioned minimum 25. And let me just say from a minimum of 25 up to a maximum of 40. Okay, so there is another quote from Hippocrates, the father of medicine, that states that all disease begins in the gut. Diet is one factor that affects our digestive system. Not eating enough plant foods, consuming too much sugar and animal foods, preservative, high fat intake, and gluten. When we consume adequate amount of fiber from fresh fruits, vegetables, and whole grains, they provide our body energy and nutrients that our body needs. Fiber is protective against some forms of cancer like colon, stomach, and breast cancer, and can increase survival of those already diagnosed. Fiber can help to regulate the hormone estrogen in the body. Excess estrogen is normally secreted into the intestines, where fiber then binds with the hormones and move it out of the body. Without fiber, estrogen can be reabsorbed from the intestine back into the bloodstream and increase the risk of breast cancer. More health benefits. They are also fabulously fiber-rich food, okay? Fiber helps you to live longer. Fiber improves blood sugar level. Fiber helps you feel full. Fiber-rich foods are frequently free of fats and low in calories. Fiber helps lower risk factors of cancer, heart disease, and other illnesses. Fiber can act like a security guard and bind with the bile acid to remove them from the intestines. Fiber helps to achieve healthier weight. Fiber is found in fruits and all sorts of other food, but not in animal protein, eggs, and dairy. Okay, in summary, we want you to know the whole story about fiber and how fiber is helpful for us, and it helps us to guard us against some cancer. This is a handout. If you want to read more about high fiber foods, you can go to todaysdietitian.com, and in their search bar, put in high fiber food handout. Okay, and next up is Millicent, Chef M. Are there any, while she is coming back in, are there any questions? Go ahead, CJ.
So are you saying that the lack of fiber is linked to lung cancer? Because you stated that lung cancer is on the rise.
No, well, yes, in a sense, because the ingredients that are in tobacco, they are carcinogens and they are toxic. So in a sense, yes. So when we have a higher intake of fiber, it helps to remove toxins from the body through the bloodstream. So in a sense, yes, it does in overall. But that opening statement was just talking about lung cancer and the percentage and the link that it can have with fiber, because, and with having a healthy diet, because if you have these nutrients, these antioxidants can help to guard and protect your cells against insults like toxins coming into the body. And maybe Dr. Lee can have some more insight on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is such an interesting and important point, because I think that there is a lot to do with the fiber. And I love your talk. I want to steal all your slides because I think they're so informative. But I do think there's also sort of with fiber and what you were talking about, like natural foods that are not as processed, you also may have a healthier gut in terms of the microbiome and like the good bacteria. And there's more and more data that even not just like colon cancer, because we think of like the gut and we think of colon cancer, but there's a lot more data to suggest that maybe even lung cancer, other cancers, having that more healthy gut and microbiome, as they call it, may actually be associated. So a lot of these studies are people, when they look at like large groups of people who are diagnosed with cancers or not cancers, and then they look back at their dietary intake. And so there was a study in like 28, like the one that you mentioned.
So Dr. Lee, I know you're passionate about it.
Yeah. So we can, but that's the main thing that we want to talk about.
We can tie it in if you want to lead off with that question.
Yeah.
And
Perfect.
more information, that'll be great. Okay, you're on, Chef Milton.
Hello, everybody. I'm Chef M. I'm not sure if Dale did an introduction or not. I'm sorry. I had a little bit of an issue with my connection for a second. But I am Chef M with Cooking Canvas. I also represent the other half of this collaborative with Stonebridge Healthy Community Outreach Initiative. Did you run through all of this, Dale?
No, I did not.
Okay. I studied culinary at Le Cordon Bleu in Chicago. Culinary has always been a passion of mine, and my goal is to show people that you can eat an abundance of healthy food, an abundance of wholesome, fresh-made food very easily and very quickly. So we are still focusing on cruciferous vegetables, and tonight I want to show you guys some snacks, because I think any part of changing a diet, you need to know what you can replace it with, and what are some of those things that still give you the nuances that you used to and that you grew up with, but in a healthier fashion. So with that, I have some cauliflower popcorn, Parmesan cauliflower popcorn we're gonna make for you tonight. So it's, like a cheese popcorn. And then also some crudité, so just some raw veggies and a little dip. So we're gonna start, the cauliflower has to go into the oven. So I usually prep. I think most of you that watch me know that. but I just wanted to show you how I broke this down. So this is just one of the little florets of the cauliflower. And what I did, and you certainly don't have to trim off all the stem, but to give it that popcorn feel and texture, I just trimmed it all the way down so that I'm literally just have the florets. Now, I know my nutritionist will tell me that there's lots of good value in the stem. So again, you don't have to trim off the stem and dispose of it, but more so for illustration, it's easier to show you, and the taste of it will feel mouth-wise a little more similar to actual popcorn. And then if you want them in smaller pieces, just break them down. So you don't have to do a whole lot of knife work. So I put them in this nice little container because I want to toss them with my olive oil and my Parmesan cheese. And I have a little garlic and salt that I'm going to save for the end. So I'm just going to dump my 2 tablespoons of olive oil and half a cup of grated Parmesan cheese. So, you know, just regular Parmesan cheese like you would put on spaghetti maybe. We're just going to shake it. Make everything nice and coated. Then we're going to bake it in a preheated oven before, at 400 degrees for about 15 minutes. And I'm using this slotted spoon to take back some of the extra Parmesan cheese and any of the excess oil too. Because we don't want that to cook off. Because you can always use that extra Parmesan cheese as an extra topping. I know people like extra butter, but I like extra cheese on my popcorn. And we'll just put this in a single layer and pop this in the oven. We'll start out with about 10 minutes and then we'll move it around, see how it's cooking. Because we don't want it to cook all the way through. We just want it to brown a little bit. Have a little bit of a popcorn feel to it. And if you prefer to do it raw, cauliflower is definitely very tasty raw as well. Next, we are going to make our next we're going to make our dip, and I'm going to show you how I like to lay on my nice little veggie tray. Now in this veggie tray, we have some vegetables that you probably wouldn't normally think of being in a veggie tray. So for my dip, I have some tahini sauce, which I know one of the young ladies were mentioning earlier. She was having a little difficulty finding the tahini sauce. Tahini sauce is sesame seeds ground really well, blended with olive oil. So if you don't have that, you can definitely, you know, make it. Or you can also, in your Google search, you can put in tahini sauce and go to shopping, and it usually brings up where you can find it locally. I try to do things that are fairly easy to find, but it does always depend on where you live. So in this tahini sauce, this is half a cup of tahini sauce, and just half a cup of tahini sauce, 2 tablespoons of lemon juice, just to give it a little acidity and a little emulsification. And then I also have some garlic. I have about a teaspoon of garlic and 2 teaspoons of Italian seasoning. So like a real easy, quick dressing. We're just gonna blend this all together. And you can definitely add other seasonings to your liking. If you say, you know, chef, I really don't like to taste the garlic, then leave the garlic out. Recipes are guidelines. They kind of give you some flavoring suggestions, but if you know that there are things that you don't like, you're not going to like that recipe if you put those things in it.
Chef, what about if you roast the garlic first?
Oh, you
rather
can
than
definitely
the
roast garlic. And
in
if
the
you
gar-
choose to use fresh roasted garlic, make sure that you mince it very well,
Mhm.
or put this in a blender or a
Okay.
food processor to make sure that you don't have lumps in your dip, unless you like lumpy dip or clumps of garlic.
Mhm.
Now, for our veggie tray, I have some spinach. And the spinach, we have some spinach and arugula. And we're going to use these both as the edible part, but also kind of like a garnish. So I don't know if you've ever seen like what do you want to call it? Like a tray from a deli or a restaurant or somewhere, a caterer. They'll usually have something like romaine on the bottom. And you can definitely eat it, or you should be able to eat it. But that's what we're going to do today as well. We'll have garnish on the bottom. So we'll do some spinach around the outside. And then we'll have a layer of arugula. And this is a cup of spinach. And then we'll put some arugula. And all of this whole veggie plate will be edible. So you can have your whole edible snack. And then we have some carrots. And I'm leaving a little hole in the middle so I can put my little sauce. Just put some nice little carrots around. And I don't know about you, but like sometimes I just want to crunch in my snack. So instead of grabbing potato chips, we can grab some carrots. And these were just lightly juliennes. Okay.
And
And
I
some
find,
radishes.
Chef that when they're already cut, it's so much easier to grab them.
It is. And I assumed you could also do baby carrots, but
Yes.
so
I like to buy the whole root. I really do. In our cooking class, we used to say, we want to burn a few calories.
yeah,
No, buying them baby is like the work is done for you. But
it is.
I like to burn a few calories before I eat a few calories.
And and buying them chopped is kind of the same thing. But with these, you can either do quartered like I did, or you could do little chips.
Mm-hmm.
And
But
then
if you're working and have
yeah,
those tight, definitely them already cut and prepared.
yeah. And then we also have some turnips. And these I just cut kind of into semicircles. So you have kind of like a chip. And it gives that chippy crunch.
Mm-hmm.
So that if you really want some potato chips, you can use some nice cruciferous vegetables instead. And these I did peel and wash thoroughly.
Mm-hmm.
But I think I tell you guys that all the time. Make sure anything that comes from the ground, you wash thoroughly. And then you have a nice colorful plate that's completely edible. And you could also switch this up and do it as a salad if you choose. But I wanted to do some snacks today. And this is definitely a snack plate.
That's a real good tip of using turnips as a root vegetables as a side. I never have. I've grated them, I guess, I think only once. and I had it as a hidden ingredient in a salad that I had made. Yeah, but
You can
sometimes
do
I
that
do
too.
that with ikama or something like that. And can you guess what's in the salad? You know,
Yeah.
after they have eaten it, of course.
And I know that was only like 5 minutes or so, but my oven's been on for a very, very, very long time today.
I can see the steam.
Yeah. So I want to move it around because I still want them to bake a little bit, but I don't want them to burn.
Mhm.
Oh, and it smells so good. You can definitely smell that Parmesan on them. And if you, let me see, I'm trying to see how close I can get. And I'm sorry, I just kind of sprung my thumb where you were talking earlier.
Mm.
So my grip, my left-hand grip is a little light.
Oh.
So we're gonna put these back in the oven for another 5-6 minutes. Anybody have any questions? Any thoughts? Is this something that you guys think you could do?
I like the option of how you prepared the cauliflower. I usually am just roasting it, you know, with
Mhm.
some with a blend that I use. I use like a buffalo blend, and I never thought about doing it as a popcorn. So that's a new strategy for me. What about for others? Is this something you would try or something that you would? Okay, Johnny says she would.
And I
Lottie,
think,
I would try it too,
okay.
especially the cauliflower. The
Hmm.
cauliflower, I would definitely try that.
and I
Yeah.
think even with that buffalo blend that you mentioned, you could do like like a hot chip kind of
Yeah, I do. That's what they are.
popcorn kind
And
of
they're
blend.
delicious too.
Yeah,
Okay. So do you want to go to the recipes real quick?
yeah.
And we can always come back
While we're
later.
waiting on the popcorn.
Mhm.
Yeah, definitely.
These are the recipes. I believe everyone had received the recipes. We're having a photo drawing. Any recipes that we have shared with you over, since January, if you would make one of the recipes, just send us a picture to info@A4CW for a chance to win a prize. There'll be more than one winner. And even if you don't use one of our recipes, but you can create your own, the only thing that we're asking you is that it is plant-based. Okay, and we will be announcing the winner via email on November 1st. So please send them in and you can submit in more than one. So now our mealtime discussion. We have Dr. Nina Lee, who is a gynecologist oncologist, and she's going to share some facts, stats, and disparities with us.
Thank you. All right. My name's Nita Lee. Thank you very much for the chance to talk about this topic. I understand that obviously, cancer is something that affects really all of us in different ways. And sometimes I just want to recognize that because sometimes with people who are maybe on the call or on the Zoom who've had personal experiences with friends and families, I just know that sometimes this can hit home harder when we're talking about these issues. And so I just wanted to recognize that. So I wanted to review some cancer statistics. As we had talked, Dale had mentioned kind of thinking about looking at cancer statistics in Illinois, Cook County, and specifically in different Chicago communities, specific cancer burden, including the most common types of cancer, and understanding some of the areas of disparities. Also wanted to really briefly review some of the recommendations for cancer risk reduction and screening. So I'm going to start mostly just looking at some of these statistics. And so this is looking at the top 10 cancers that we see in the state of Illinois. So this is, the data always lags. And so this is looking from 2014 to 2018, which is the most up-to-date we have. And when we look at all common cancers, we see that breast cancer, prostate, lung, colon, and uterine are sort of in our top 5 cancers. And so this is something for us to keep in mind when we think about what are ways to address these different cancers. And when we look here and we look at the deaths that are due to cancer in orange, we see that changes a little bit. And we see that the most serious cancer that we see in the state of Illinois is lung and bronchus cancer, where deaths due to this are higher. But we can see again, lung cancer, breast cancer, prostate cancer, colon cancer, and other less common cancers such as pancreas, ovary, or leukemias still show up because they can be such difficult cancers and have a higher rate of people succumbing to them. When we jump into Cook County, we can also start to look at data by race and ethnicity, which is a common way that we sometimes break down data to try to see. All of these numbers are just including all cancers on this slide, and we can see that there is per 100,000 people, and that's how this statistic or incidence is always presented. We see that there are higher incidents in certain groups, including Black individuals in both male and female. But I think it's really important to get to kind of some of the details of like getting more in depth into like what's happening at the different cancers as well at the different community levels. So here we see the incidence up here. So per 100,000 women between white women, Black women, Asian and Hispanic women, and also the deaths per 100,000 women. So this is an important disparity that many people are aware of. And we have to kind of think more, you know, both locally about what are the causes of this that can be very systemic and related to a lot of different issues, as well as what can we do to help solve this problem. When we look at rates of breast cancer, and this is a jumbled slide, but we look at the full population, doesn't tell the whole story, right? The gray line's the full population, but when you start to divide up by who different people are by race and ethnicity, we see that Black women have a disproportionate burden of having breast cancer. And so though it's declining from back in 2000 to 2017, it's not declining to become quite equal yet. And that's really important for us to recognize and to acknowledge when we're thinking about our methods and our policies for reducing these rates. This is a really important slide that looks at different community neighborhoods, as you may all be familiar with in terms of like where neighborhoods are located. And if we have time at the end, I'll jump onto the chicagohealthatlas.org. It's a free website that is put on, and it's a data website to really be able to create maps, look up resources, and look up statistics by community level. And we can really see that the communities in Chicago are disproportionately affected. This is the breast cancer statistic, but similarly in other cancers. So when we look in here, and I can pull it up at later, we see some of our communities in the South and West Side do have higher rates of women getting diagnosed with breast cancer. And so this is really important to think about. Lung cancer as well. This is sort of in the city of Chicago. We're looking at like who's getting lung cancer. And if the whole population as a whole is 40 per 100,000, we see these disparities in who's getting lung cancer as well. We also note this disparity in terms of geography. And obviously we know there's a lot to do with in terms of systemic issues such as economic segregation, racial segregation, access to care, as well as environmental concerns, perhaps related to lung cancer as well. One of the cancers that, you know, we'll jump to as well that's really important, and we talked about how this was the third most common cancer in Illinois, is prostate cancer. And so this is a cancer that we don't often talk about because many times cancers below the belt don't get as much attention as breast cancer or lung cancer even. And we see a very stark difference between the rate of men who are of Black descent getting prostate cancer compared to white men. And so these are the things in terms of what we're trying to tackle, or what many, many groups are trying to tackle about how to tackle these disparities and how to address them. This again, prostate cancer in terms of geographic differences of where men are getting prostate cancer. And so this has a lot of ramifications in terms of screening for prostate cancer, education about symptoms, and really just sort of more awareness about this cancer that we don't spend as much time talking about as we should. And here you see this very stark difference in survival for men among different races with a prostate cancer diagnosis. And obviously each of these topics could be its own multiple lecture, but it's important to kind of think about these issues as they sort of relate. You know, we talked, and I think the precursor to this, I think the mission of both of these groups is so important because we think about things of like, how can we reduce our cancer risk? And it's easy, but not easy, right? So it's easy to do certain things, but it's also not easy to make a lot of these changes. But obviously a lot of these were mentioned today: heart healthy diets, alcohol intake, increasing physical activity, tobacco use. Other things we think about are sun exposure for skin cancers, breastfeeding to reduce the mother's risk of certain GYN and breast cancers, vaccines that we have for hepatitis B to prevent liver cancer, and HPV to prevent cervix, anal, and vulvar cancers, multiple 6 different cancers, and head and neck cancers, as well as screening programs. So, when we think about screening, one of the things that I wanted to go through before I talked about screening was really thinking about there are known to be sort of obesity or like weight related cancer. So we know that any of us who carry extra weight may be more predisposed to this. And these include breast cancer, colon, uterine, kidney, thyroid. So there's a whole list of these that we know that through diet and potentially through increasing physical activity, we may reduce our personal risks. Physical inactivity is also associated with particularly breast cancer after menopause, as well as uterine cancer and colon cancer. There's, the differences between this kind of vary a little bit, and this data is harder to interpret, but there may be differences, but it may mean that we just need to be community specific when we're thinking about interventions. In general, a lot of this has been mentioned before in terms of the types of dietary changes, but in terms of like decreasing sweetened drinks, alcohol use, different things like that were things that we didn't touch on today, but there's a lot of information and a lot of really good data out there about what we can do. This is a chart, and I'll leave this up here for a second, but it really does talk a lot about the same things we began the evening with in terms of a diet rich in whole grains, vegetables, fruits, and beans, and various different things that we can do to prevent cancers as best as we can. One of the big concerns is that we saw a major shift last year in 2020 with the number of screenings that were done for cancer. And that was really important because we don't want to identify cancers late, or we don't want to miss too many screening. And so this is something really that we've been, as we're getting hopefully back to normal and back up and running, we really want people to catch up with. Lung cancer screening is something that we don't often think about, but the guidelines suggest that a current smoker or a former smoker who quit within 15 years between the ages of 50 and 80 and had a certain number of cigarettes per day or packs per day could benefit from low dose CT scan screening to find cancer early, which is really underutilized. And 7 out of 8 adults who could get screened do not get the screening done, unfortunately. Colon cancer, an easy algorithm. If you're over 45, now if you have a family history, you may have to be screened sooner as well. But this algorithm of starting at age 45, and what are our options? Colonoscopy, a visual inspection, take-home screening, which can be stool tests, or sometimes other types of radiology, which can be a virtual colonoscopy. So talking about what could be options. Prostate cancer, much more confusing because there's a debate about should there be screening or not, but this is such an important issue that I think it's really important. Men who are older than 50, African-American men, or men whose father, brother, or son had prostate cancer may need to kind of think about screening, which can be done with an exam and a blood test called the PSA. We know early diagnosis can help, but there had been a little bit of controversy about maybe over-diagnosing prostate cancer in many older men who it wouldn't change their overall outcome because it was such a slow-growing cancer. However, that may not be the case in African-American men, and we don't want to lose that opportunity to allow screening to help us find cancers earlier, smaller, and in a curable way. Cervical cancer, which is, what I focus in on, really pap smears, making sure pap and HPV tests are done starting around age 21. You can even start a little bit later, up to 25 in some recommendations, but our general OBGYN group still recommend 21. And also getting the HPV vaccine, which can also prevent other types of cancers. Breast cancer, obviously October, we think a lot about this because it's Breast Cancer Awareness Month, but really starting at age 40 to 45, women should really have the option of starting with screening with a mammogram every year. And newer studies have suggested this may be particularly important for African-American women who may have a higher rate of younger onset of breast cancers. Now, if you're at an average risk, this is what we know, starting at age 40 and then continuing screening and talking to your doctor. If you have a family history, however, many women will start screening even 10 years prior to the youngest person in their family who got breast cancer. So all of these things do have to kind of be balanced and individualized with your own family history as well. And then of course, the follow-up testing for any type of abnormal mammogram is also very important. I wanted to kind of, stop share to make sure we could answer any questions. And if anybody was interested in looking at that Chicago Health Atlas program, I'm happy to put that on and just show you how that website works if anybody thinks that would be helpful.
I'd be interested in seeing it.
And while you're looking for it, I'll just start with a question too. I know there's current recommendations for like colon cancer.
Yes.
And they always make a reference that if you have a family member, but it appears there's so many people that are being diagnosed and they're the first generation.
Yes, that's true.
And I also find that by me being a breast cancer survivor, and I'm in about 3 support groups that have been, there's first generation breast cancer,
Yes,
being
yes.
diagnosed in a family.
I
And
think
so
that's
I just find that a little bit off.
Yeah, no, I do think both things are important, right? So sometimes people reveal that they hadn't heard about any family history, but sometimes many women have never had a family history or many of these cancers. But there is a lot being done about genetic testing to see if it is something hereditary, which for breast cancer could be up to, depends on the age of when you get the breast cancer. So that person may actually be the link to allow prevention for others. And so knowing about the family history can sometimes actually get women in the family to be screened earlier.
Yes.
And so you're right. I totally agree with you. It's not to say that it's not off. I just think that for those family members who do have a family history, then using that. But I totally agree with you that most women may not have had a family history at all, quite honestly. This is, yes.
Okay, this is Johnny Williams, and there's 2 things that you touched on was lung cancer, low dose CT.
CT.
And I've been smoking for 50 years. Is that something you recommend I do?
It is. So the recent recommendations are for people who've been smoking a certain amount for a certain number of years, doing the CT scans are recommended. And so talking to your doctor, and it's a little bit of a different CT scan because it specifically uses a lower dose and it's a faster scan than if you have to get a scan for like a problem that you have or somebody. So I would recommend that because I think we're really seeing that those scans are like underused. So these recommendations are coming out, but they're not being like, I don't think people talk about them. Like we don't talk about it like we talk about mammogram, right? Like everywhere on, we hear about that more because I think the community of women and the community of survivors, and because it's more of a common cancer, even than lung cancer, even though it's, close. So I just think we don't talk about it enough. So I would definitely recommend to talking to your doctor about if that would be a good fit.
Then one more thing. You talked about cervical cancer, HPV vaccine.
Yes.
I had a hysterectomy years ago, but I still have my ovaries. Is that something I should be screened for?
So if you had a hysterectomy years ago and it wasn't because of any related HPV things such as cervix cancer or vulvar cancer, you don't have to have a pap smear. And if you have ovaries, unfortunately, there's no screening test for ovarian cancer. So you don't necessarily have to have a pap smear done for that.
And I'm just going to say this out front. When you get to a certain age, they stop doing your pap smears. Am I correct?
They recommend, and this is a sore point with me, quite honestly, they recommend that if you've had regular pap smears after 65, you don't necessarily have to have pap smears. Now, many women after sort of like their childbearing years or anything, like haven't really gone to the gynecologist. They may have a primary care doctor who doesn't do gyne exams or something like that. Nobody wants to go to, to do gyne exams necessarily. So we do see about 15 to 20% of women who are diagnosed with cervix cancer are over the age of 65. So really knowing the symptoms and then also knowing that they had maybe in their 50s and 60s, at least one pap test that was totally normal would probably drop that number down.
And I want to add, Dr. Lee, that it's well documented that the senior groups, which are now, the baby boomers, we're in that group and called the real seniors, the elders. Well, there was a study that was done is that the STDs are really, that's one of the highest population that they're finding,
Yeah.
STDs is in the
I
seniors
think those
and
are,
the teens.
I think it's important because I think people also don't want to think about anybody, sexual function and it's, everyone, there's nothing wrong with that. I think people just don't want to think about it. And so I do agree because you can get HPV from sexual transmission. It's very important, but also HPV you can have exposure in your 30s, like never have sex again and have cervix cancer in your 50s. So
Mhm.
it's not always related to when you're necessarily sexually active. It's kind of like chickenpox and shingles. You had chickenpox when you were 9, but then you get shingles when you're older. This is the website. I just wanted to just put it on here because it's free. It's totally publicly available. And when you're looking at the website itself, you can actually click on individual communities and kind of click to where, so if somebody wants to throw out a community that we want me to click on, so we can kind of look to see what happens in different communities. And so when you click on this, I'm just going to click on South Shore. It will tell you what's happening specifically in breast cancer, like what's happening, if we go to this place, it'll tell you what's happening in South Shore. So it kind of tells you a lot if anybody's looking at like health data or anyone wants to share health data. There's a lot of different ways that this website can be very helpful for all sorts of health issues. And so this can be talking about routine checkups rates or prenatal care or insurance status. And so there's a lot of different indicators. So this is how I kind of sometimes will look things up like asthma or lung cancer. You can look that up again. And again, trying to kind of really hone in on what's happening at an individual community may help try to kind of think about like, well, what kinds of things would we want to tackle and what kinds of organizations and different groups would want to focus on which topic. So this is a great resource and I highly recommend it. If you go to their website, they'll also do trainings for organizations. They've been obviously very busy because of COVID, because it's run by the Chicago Department of Public Health, but they're very good at kind of doing individual training.
I just want to end that, yes, we know that this is Breast Cancer Awareness Month, but they all matter and they matter every month. I just want to point out one slide over to your right about slides, which Dr. Lee had covered, cancer by the number, but do you realize that there's over 100 types of cancer? And then there's a growing percentage of children also that are being impacted by cancer. And so it's not just the adults, but it's children as well. And so we somewhat led into our Q&A and comments, which we can go into in the after talk. We just want to remind you to join us next week on the 21st, where we're going to have Nancy Rodriguez. She is a Food for Life instructor, and she's also going to continue the conversation at Foods That Fight for You for cancer prevention and survival. These are our two organizations. You can take a quick print screen of our contact if you want to get a hold of Ali Smith, who is the president of Stonebridge, or myself, Dale Kane. And we want to thank Cooking Canvas, Millicent Walker, fondly known as Chef M, for sponsoring the cooking demo today. And that's something that I'm really going to try. I'm going to try that cauliflower popcorn for during Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
So I'm going to end with let's stay connected. These are our contact, our email, telephone number, our website. We want you to follow us on Facebook. We have a new Facebook page, and we also have a new Instagram page. So please like us and follow us.
Dale, can I also mention Stonebridge Healthy Community also has our annual diabetes awareness seminar coming up. Please check out our webpage, stonebridgehealthycommunity.org, for details. We are also on Facebook as well. Thank you.